Imagine a morning that doesn't begin with the harsh glare of a smartphone or an endless stream of notifications demanding your immediate attention. In Britain during the 1980s or early 90s, the morning had a completely different rhythm. It was weighty, tangible, and above all, quiet. When you woke up, the only sound from outside was the distant, rhythmic clinking of glass bottles left on your doorstep by the milkman. It was the sound of reassurance that the world was still turning, even though you hadn't received a single piece of news about it yet. In those days, information didn't chase you. You had to go to it yourself. You'd walk downstairs, stepping onto the cool linoleum, and open the front door to collect the morning newspaper, heavy, smelling of fresh printer's ink that would leave grey smudges on your fingertips. It was your only portal to the wider world, and everything that had happened yesterday waited patiently for you on those pages. The most striking thing for today's generation is the fact that when you left the house in those years, you truly disappeared. The moment that heavy oak door clicked shut behind you, you became unreachable. You didn't have a device in your pocket that allowed anyone on the planet to find you at any given second. It was a state of absolute, almost frightening freedom. If you were running late for a meeting by the station clock, you were simply late. There was no way to send a text saying, "Be there in 5." You just hoped your friend was still there, waiting, looking at the passers-by rather than at a screen. Life was built on agreements that carried weight. If you said you'd be at the pub at 8 o'clock, you were there. It fostered a certain discipline of spirit and a respect for other people's time that today feels like a lost artifact. At home, the only link to the outside world was the landline telephone, usually kept in the hallway, the coldest spot in the house. It was tethered to the wall by a short, coiled cord that defined the radius of your privacy. If you were a teenager wanting to talk to someone special, you had to crouch on the carpet, stretching that cord to its absolute limit to whisper your secrets while the rest of the family had dinner just behind the door. And of course, there was always the risk that your father would pick up the receiver. Every ring was an event, a small electric spark of anticipation. We lived in a world where waiting wasn't a punishment. It was part of the process. We waited for holiday photos to be developed. We waited a whole week for a favorite TV show. We waited for a letter in the letterbox. And in that waiting, there was a special kind of value. The things we had to wait for meant so much more to us. We didn't just consume content. We lived through moments that had a texture, weight, and significance that is unreachable in the era of instant gratification. If you grew up in Britain before the era of digital dominance, the bright red cast-iron K6 telephone box was much more than just an architectural symbol. It was your headquarters, your confessional, and your only lifeline to home when you were on the move. Stepping inside, you entered a distinct micro-world. There was always a specific, incomparable smell, a mixture of old paper, stale tobacco smoke, a hint of dampness, and cold metal. The heavy door would shut with a dull, solid thud, cutting off the noise of the street and the rain, and for a moment, you found yourself in absolute solitude, surrounded by glass panes that on cold days would quickly fog up from the warmth of your breath. The process of making a call was a true ritual that required both skill and composure. First, you would check the contents of your pockets. Life was measured in 10 pence and 50 pence pieces. You would lift the heavy black receiver, which felt like a substantial tool rather than a toy, and press it to your ear. listening for the long, steady dial tone. Then came the moment of truth. You dropped a coin into the cool metal slot and heard it tumble with a characteristic clink into the depths of the machine. If you didn't have any change, there was the reverse charge call, a procedure that required an operator who, in a firm but polite voice, would ask the person on the other end, "Will you accept a call from—" It was a moment of slight embarrassment and immense relief when your mum, on the other side of Britain, agreed to pay for your 1 minute, "I'm okay, just going to be late." But the most dramatic sound of that time was the beep, beep, beep signal, the famous pips. This sharp sound meant that your money was running out. You had only a few seconds to blurt out the most important information before the connection was ruthlessly cut off. It was a dance with time. You would feverishly rummage through your pocket for another coin, while the person on the other end shouted, "Are you there? Are you still there?" If the coin was swallowed by the machine in time, the conversation continued, and it felt like a small victory over circumstance. In those moments, we learned to speak briefly, concisely, and only about what truly mattered. We didn't waste time on idle chatter because every second had a physical cost expressed in metal. Outside, beyond the glass, a queue would often form. This was a separate part of British etiquette. People would stand under umbrellas, shifting from foot to foot, pointedly checking their watches, but no one dared to knock on the glass until a decent amount of time had passed. The booth was a sacred space of privacy. Inside, you could find heavy, tattered volumes of telephone directories tethered to the shelf by steel chains. The pages were covered in names, numbers, and random notes left by hundreds of people before you. It was a kind of analog social network where everyone left an invisible trace. Today, these booths stand as monuments to a bygone age. Some now house tiny libraries or defibrillators, but for us, they will always remain the place where we first learned how much a short call home could mean when you had only one 10-pence piece left in your pocket and the sky was growing dark. For someone today, accustomed to the infinite libraries of Netflix and the ability to pause life itself, it is difficult to imagine a world where television was the dictator of your time. In Britain during the 80s and early 90s, choice was painfully simple. BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, and later, the daring Channel 4. This was the era of appointment viewing, where the very structure of your evening was determined by a program controller in London. The television set in those years was a massive object, often encased in a wooden cabinet, taking pride of place in the corner of the room. Turning it on was a physical act. You pressed a heavy button that emitted a deep, mechanical click, and then you waited. The screen didn't spring to life instantly. First, there was the rising hum of static electricity, the smell of warmed-up dust and valves, and only then, from a tiny glowing dot in the center, would the image slowly unfurl. If the signal was poor, a family member would inevitably have to perform a risky dance with the indoor aerial, trying to catch a clear picture amidst the snowstorm on the screen. The sacred text for every household was the Radio Times or TV Times. Leafing through these pages on a Thursday evening was a ritual of planning your life for the week ahead. We circled our favorite shows with a pen because we knew if you missed an episode of Only Fools and Horses or the finale of a beloved detective series, it was gone forever. There was no rewind button, no iPlayer, no way to watch it later. You were either at the screen at 7:30 p.m. or you were left out of the nationwide conversation the following morning. This created an incredible sense of community. The whole country froze simultaneously when a scandal erupted in EastEnders, and the whole country headed to the kitchen to put the kettle on at the exact same moment when the commercial breaks started on ITV. Britain's National Grid engineers still remember these moments as TV pickups, when millions of kettles were switched on in the same second, creating a colossal surge in demand. It was the heartbeat of the nation, pulsing in time with the television schedule. But perhaps the strangest and slightly haunting thing for a modern viewer was how the television day ended. Television wasn't 24/7. In the dead of night, after the final news bulletin and the playing of the national anthem, God Save the Queen, the programming simply stopped. The screen didn't go black. It turned into something hypnotic and strange. The famous Test Card F would appear, featuring a young girl playing noughts and crosses with a rag doll against a backdrop of colored bars. Accompanied by a monotonous, never-ending sine wave tone, this image could stay there for hours. There was something deeply melancholic about it, a reminder that the world was going to sleep, and so should you. We lived in a world where entertainment had its boundaries, and those boundaries gave us the opportunity for silence and reflection. We weren't slaves to algorithms pushing video after video at us. We were viewers who cherished every frame because we knew it was a fleeting moment. It was a time when television didn't just fill the background. It created moments we lived through together, sitting on the carpet in the warm glow of the cathode ray tube. When we look back at the Britain that no longer exists, it is easy to fall into the trap of thinking we miss the inconveniences, the cold phone boxes, the queues, or the grainy images on the television. But in reality, our longing is directed toward something much deeper and more elusive. We miss the freedom of being unreachable. In the pre-internet world, we had the luxury of silence. Not the silence where there is simply no sound, but the silence where there is no informational noise. We lived in the present moment, not because we read about it in psychology books, but because we had no other choice. If you walked through a park on a Sunday afternoon, you saw the trees, the clouds, and the faces of passers-by, not an endless feed of other people's lives in a small, glowing rectangle. Your attention belonged only to you. It was an era when our thoughts could flow smoothly, uninterrupted by notifications, and when we could follow an idea to its conclusion before it was washed away by the next stream of content. There was a particular texture to life that feels almost lost today. It was the texture of waiting and anticipation. When you wrote a letter to a friend at the other end of the country, you put a piece of your soul into that act. You chose the paper, made sure your handwriting was legible, and as you dropped the envelope into the bright red post box, you initiated a process that required patience. The reply would come in a few days, and that anticipation made the received letter precious. We kept those letters in shoeboxes, not in cloud storage. We treated photographs the same way. We had only 24 or 36 exposures on a roll of film, and every click of the shutter was a conscious decision. We didn't know if the shot had come out until we picked up the envelope from the chemist a week later, and even if someone's head was cropped or the frame was slightly blurred, it was physical proof of a moment that you could hold in your hands, pass around the table, and glue into an album. These artifacts had weight. They aged with us, acquiring the scent of time and yellowing at the edges. Today's world offers us incredible convenience, but we have paid a high price for it. We have lost the right to be absent. We are constantly on, constantly available, constantly comparing ourselves to idealized images. Our children will never know that sweet sense of total autonomy, of being alone with the world and your own thoughts. We have become more efficient, but have we become happier? That old Britain, with its slow trains, paper maps, and 4 television channels, taught us patience and attentiveness to others. We learned to listen because we couldn't just scroll past a boring conversationalist. We learned to value what we had because a replacement wasn't available with a single click. Perhaps that is why those memories warm our hearts so much today. It isn't just nostalgia for old things. It's a longing for that state of mind where the world felt vast, mysterious, and full of possibilities for those ready to simply look and wait. As we peer into the past, we realize that those inconveniences were actually the guardians of our peace of mind. And although we will never return to that time, we can try to preserve within ourselves at least a fragment of that analog silence. Turn off the notifications, put down the phone, and just look out the window, as we did 30 years ago when the only major event of the day was the arrival of the milkman or the start of a favorite soap opera at 7:30. And what do you miss most from that era? Was it the simplicity of communication, or perhaps that very feeling when you could truly disappear from everyone for a couple of hours? Tell your story in the comments. Your memories are what bring history to life, and perhaps it is your story that will help someone else remember that forgotten taste of freedom.